in China. Dave Zirin. Over the weekend, a 30-minute video of Peng Shuai. Peng Shuai undertook a 30-minute video call with International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach, because there had been some question over whether she had been disappeared after accusing a senior member of Chinese government, a former senior member of Chinese government, of sexual assault. We hadn't heard from her for a couple of weeks, but she showed up in a restaurant on a video published by Chinese state-run media, and then a tennis tournament, and now this 30-minute call with Thomas Bach. So given that this 30-minute video call happened, I'm guessing, Dave, that we shouldn't have any more worries about sports and human rights and the sports industry's relationship with a repressive regime that is prone to disappearing people for standing up for themselves. I guess all the worries are gone now, right? Because we had a video call.
Yeah, I'm more worried now than I was before the video call, quite frankly.
Why do you say that?
Because the International Olympic Committee, when Peng Shuai first was disappeared, which is what took place. I mean, she put an accusation out about sexual assault against a leading Chinese Communist Party official, and the post was scrubbed, and then she just disappeared. And the World Tennis Association, the Women's Tennis Association, Human Rights Watch, a lot of groups said we need proof of life, and we need to know that she's okay, and we need to know that her accusations are being heard. The IOC chose to not say or do a thing. They just said, oh, sometimes it's best to work behind the scenes, which if I'm an athlete who's about to go to Beijing in 2022, that's a chilling response.
Yes.
But because you wonder, wow, what if I go there and I say something like, go Tibet or something like that? Am I going to find myself on the wrong side of a jail cell? And so to have the International Olympic Committee now emerge as the player to say, nothing to see here, everybody, Peng Shuai is okay, without anything actionable coming about it, like she's going to be able to travel outside the country. She's going to be able to talk to groups that deal with issues of sexual assault. She's going to be able to speak freely to human rights organizations. None of that is on the table. It's just the IOC saying everything is going to be okay. And that's chilling, because this is now more than just the IOC not wanting to intervene in the affairs of the Chinese state. This is now the IOC and Thomas Bach acting in complicity with the Chinese state. And so as an athlete going over there, I would be very, very nervous about who has my back and who doesn't when I'm on Chinese soil.
Yeah, and what I can't figure out, one is what took I guess I can't figure out what took the IOC so long, because they don't want to mess up their money. But at the same time, like, look, a lot of us are into the Olympics. Like, that directly affects what we do here on CBC's platform, because with no Olympics, the revenue is a lot smaller and there are a lot fewer things we can do. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we can't express a genuine concern over what's happening over there and the relationship between human rights, sports, and the government. And so, Megan McPeak, let me ask you this: like, does this incident, like, how does this incident, if at all, affect like the joy you might be able to take out of watching the Olympics in Beijing this winter?
I think even before this happened, there might have been less joy watching the Winter Olympics in Beijing, just because of everything that's gone on surrounding the lead up to this, and, you know, people's feelings with the Olympics still continuing in 2022 in Beijing. So I think this has now just exacerbated how people were feeling beforehand, and in some cases might have given people the talking point or an extra edge in, you know, pushing forward the narrative of why are we having the Olympics in a country that's dealing with human rights issues, excuse me. So I don't think there was much joy beforehand. I think there's even less now. And if I'm a female athlete, I'm probably even more nervous about going, to Dave's point, the athletes in general. But if you're a female athlete, you might be even more scared, because God forbid something happens to a female athlete when they're over there. How do we know that, you know, if there's a situation, because we saw it in Tokyo, there was allegations of sexual harassment.
Yes.
How do we know if that happens again in Beijing 2022? God forbid it does. Like I said, I don't wish that on anyone, but if it does, how do we know that those allegations will be taken seriously by the authorities there? We don't. And if I'm a female athlete, I'd be very scared and very nervous in that situation, because you would expect your country to believe you, no matter what country you're coming from as an athlete, but you would also expect the host country's authorities to believe you if there's a situation like we saw in Tokyo, of multiple allegations of sexual harassment against one person. And we saw that those allegations weren't really taken very seriously in Tokyo. How do we know the same thing, if it were to happen, would be taken as serious or more serious in Beijing? It's very concerning, to be honest with you. I'm very concerned for the female athletes that do choose to go over there from any country, not just Canada.
Right. And what we're seeing now in real time is one of the things, Dave, you brought up at the tail end of the Tokyo Olympics, when the costs started coming in. And I'm sure there'll be more costs to come in the years to come. And how much other potential Olympic hosts are looking at this, are looking at the Olympic Games every 2 years and seeing how much it costs and starting to figure out that it's not worth it to incur that kind of debt, to incur that kind of environmental damage to host these games, where you might not, your country may or may not be able to see like a lasting positive impact from that. And one of the things we talked about is the more expensive these games become and the more burdensome they become on the hosts, the more hosting the Olympics starts to appeal to countries with abhorrent human rights records that want to launder their public image by hosting these big parties. How can we be a corrupt country if we are hosting the Olympics? We're Saudi Arabia. Yeah, you know what? Our head of state ordered the killing of an American journalist, but how corrupt can we be? We have heavyweight title matches. Dave, like how telling is it now that it was the IOC that wound up on the receiving end of that call and not the WTA or some other entity?
Yeah, or an organization like Human Rights Watch, or any member of the tennis media that's outside of China. I mean, it's actually chilling to me, because the International Olympic Committee has had an argument that they've been making for 30, 40. Actually, this argument goes back to 1936, when the Olympics were held in Hitler's Berlin, is that they've made the argument that it's good for the Olympics to go to countries that are authoritarian or dictatorial, or whatever word you might want to use, undemocratic, because the IOC helps bring the kinds of values to a country that actually open it up a little more, that make the country more democratic, that open it up. You don't want to isolate these countries. This is all the International Olympic Committee's argument for why they would have the Winter Olympics in a place like Beijing. But you actually see the opposite take place. When the IOC goes to countries like Tokyo, for example, or Los Angeles in 2028, it's actually the IOC brings some of that authoritarianism from places like China or Saudi Arabia, brings them to countries like to cities like Tokyo and cities like Los Angeles. Those countries and those cities become weighed down by debt, displacement, the hyper-militarization of public space. And in this latest instance, you're seeing the fundamental covering up of a sexual assault that the IOC is now complicit in. And that's the part that's particularly chilling, is that the IOC says we're here to open up these countries, but now they're acting in complicity with trying to shut this story down.
Right. And as we discussed offline, we're all old enough to remember when South Africa was not part of the Olympic community because of apartheid. So there is precedent for excommunicating companies or telling countries that there is a bare minimum human rights standard you have to meet if you want to become and remain part of this community. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, just to say that both South Africa and Rhodesia, the International Olympic Committee wanted them as apartheid countries to be part of the Olympics with that same argument, but it took a revolt by Black athletes.
Yes.
To get them to be disavowed from the Olympic Games. And I mean, if you need a revolt by your best athletes just to get the IOC to do something that's logical and commonsensical, it just says something about where their politics are rooted.